Guys, welcome back. We're coming off of a nice week off in between F1 rounds, and it's really starting to heat up as we head to North America for the first time. That's right, it's the 2025 Canadian Grand Prix. What's going on, guys? Welcome back, and we are here to make our predictions for this year's Canadian Grand Prix. Honestly, it's slowly grown into one of the more interesting races on the calendar, both from a weather perspective as well as a interesting track perspective, where you have the really long backstretch and also a very technical first sector as well. So I don't know, it's just something that sort of started to gel with me over time. Not necessarily for my team specifically, because my team, I can't remember the last time good things happened for us here. But all in all, we're not here to talk about that. We're here to make our predictions for what's going to happen this weekend in Canada. We're going to be talking about our biggest positive surprise, our biggest disappointments, our qualifying top three, our race podium, and as always, we will wrap things up with our one crazy prediction. But without further ado, let's go ahead and jump on into this thing with our biggest positive surprise. This weekend for biggest positive surprise, I'm once again taking a very solid prediction because I really need to start racking up some points. Had a very hit or miss week last time out, and so we're here to make some solid predictions, but as well I want to try and get a little spicy. You know, you don't want to go too clean too early, you know. So biggest positive surprise for this weekend is Alex Albon. After a pretty tough Sunday a couple of weekends ago, Alex unfortunately having to retire from the Spanish Grand Prix from some contact with other drivers on track multiple times, forcing him to have to retire. I think we'll see a very, very good bounce back weekend from Alex, who's had a tremendous season so far here in 2025, finishing in the top 5 or 6 more times than I think I could count in the recent years for Williams. So he's been on an absolute tear, and I think this weekend we're going to see him bounce back from a tough weekend in Spain and finish back up rightfully where he should in the points and pushing top 5 if I had to guess. Before we move on to our biggest disappointment prediction, if you haven't already, subscribe down below. We would love to have you join our little community here. It's growing every single week. We would love to have you join us if you would like to, jump in on the conversation. We have a fun little Discord that we'd like to talk, as well as make predictions for these. You'll see along the bottom of the screen over the course of this predictions. People who have gotten their predictions in before this video goes live will have their predictions, put into the video, and everyone else can just drop them in Discord anytime before the weekend begins. It's a lot of smack talk, it's friendly jabs here and there, and a community championship that lasts all season long. So I hope you'll join us. I think it would be a lot of fun. But without further ado, let's go ahead and jump on into our biggest disappointment. For biggest disappointment this weekend, I'm sort of going back to back. I'm going for a driver that's going back to back. I think a little bit of a disappointment. I'm going with Lance Stroll this week. Obviously, his home race following a Spanish Grand Prix, which didn't happen for him because he withdrew from the weekend after qualifying. And at least I haven't seen a whole lot of information about that. He's supposedly going to be back in the car this weekend, but I think just with a lot of the weirdness going around with Stroll right now, I really feel like this one is truly a vibes pick, but I feel like it's been a minute since we've seen Stroll have a really good Canadian Grand Prix, so I think it's a pretty solid case here. If he's not feeling 100% physically going into your home race, maybe you push a little too hard, maybe you decide to save your health, who knows, but I think it could be a bit of a return to earth for Aston Martin, who saw a very decent result last week with Fernando Alonso, who, obviously stayed in the race after Stroll pulled out. And I think we could see another weekend where Aston Martin might struggle just a little bit. So my biggest disappointment this week, Lance Stroll. Let's move on now to qualifying top 3. We'll begin in P3, and it's a driver who has done pretty decently around Canada in the last couple of years. Last season in a machine that probably wasn't as good as it is this year. I'm going with George Russell for top 3 start here in Canada this weekend. I think it's been a bit of time since we've seen George put in a very solid qualifying, result. I think we could see it this weekend. He's done decently enough around Canada, and I think the Mercedes is definitely a bit more stable than it was even last year or the year, but definitely before the year before that. And so I think this could be a weekend where we see George come back a little refreshed, trying to take another step forward and continue to, be very consistent over the course of this season so far. I think it could see it again with a second row start, P3 in qualifying, George Russell. As we move on now to P2 in qualifying, and I am going with Lando Norris. P2 in qualifying for me this weekend. I think it's pretty clear that the McLaren is one of, if not the fastest cars on the grid. Now, and I think that is necessarily much more in tune to race pace than qualifying pace, but at the same time, we've seen that the McLaren is more than quick enough to put it on pole, and I think it could be another solid weekend for McLaren. And I think until we see teams really, once again, very similar to things I've said in years past, until we see teams start to really push, McLaren for pole positions, I think this could be another one where they start to just kind of run away with it even more than they have now. So Lando Norris, P2 in qualifying for me this weekend in Canada. And that leaves only P1, Oscar Piastri, who I think is on a bit of a tear this year. I think a lot of people are surprised to see Oscar performing at the level he is. That said, I don't think I am necessarily. I do think that Lando would have come into the season a bit more ready to challenge and be consistently at the top, but Oscar has absolutely taken the reins from him by force, and I think it's going to continue on Saturday this weekend in Canada when Oscar Piastri puts it on pole position for this weekend's Grand Prix. So there we have it, my qualifying top three: a George Russell P3, a Lando Norris P2, and an Oscar Piastri pole position. Let's move on now to the race podium, where we all end up when the weekend is done and dusted. And we'll begin in P3, and I am going for the Red Bull of Max Verstappen. I think it's going to be pretty hard to see Red Bull kind of follow up a weekend like Spain and not expect them to bounce back, especially at a track like Canada, which has treated them pretty kindly over the years. I think Max is definitely going to want to put the last result out of his mind, and Red Bull, I'm sure, is right there with him. So I think we'll see a bit of a shake-up this weekend, potentially some inclement weather mixing up the grid. We know how good Max would be in the wet, so this one might actually just kind of be a bit of a covering my bases type of thing, because I think Max is more than capable of finishing on the podium this weekend, especially if it's a little wet, mixed conditions race. I think we could see something special from Max this weekend, finish on podium. So I feel absolutely not bad whatsoever putting him here in P3. As we move on now to P2 this weekend, I've gone for Oscar Piastri. I think I'm kind of going with the vibe that maybe there's something that happens in the race, whether it be weather or an ill-timed safety car or something like that, an incident somewhere that impacts the race enough to shake up the top three. And I think Oscar, unfortunately, is just going to get, the short end of the stick this weekend, whether it might even be just, getting a bad jump off the line, which we haven't necessarily seen from him, but you never know what's going to happen in Formula One. And I think we could see a bit more frustration and aggressiveness from Lando. I know Lando really likes to try and play the long game, but I think we may have a chance of seeing Lando pull something off, not to spoil my P1 prediction, but I think Oscar, very solid race, but I do think there might be something that happens over the course of the full race distance that might just put him, unfortunately, behind the 8 ball, and he'll have to take what he can get. And if that's his P2 in this race, I think he would still take that, all things considered. I feel like I kind of gave away my pick for the winner of the Canadian Grand Prix. I went with Lando Norris. This one could either come from, a move at the beginning of the race, or maybe some incident over the course of the full race distance that puts him at the front by the time the checkered flag falls. But I think we could see Lando win this weekend. I think it would be very good for him, both mentally and for his championship hopes, to kind of really put one on Oscar, especially if my prediction for qualifying comes true, where he actually starts behind Oscar. I think Lando knows that he needs to start putting in some of these, results that kind of keep him as close as humanly possible to Oscar. And while finishing behind him, P2 compared to Oscar's P1 wouldn't be the end of the world. I'm sure Lando's itching to get back on the top step of the podium once again, and I think it might happen this weekend here in Canada. All right, guys, let's round out our predictions this weekend with our one crazy prediction, and we return to qualifying. I'm predicting an individual driver's qualifying performance, and I am going with Yuki Tsunoda qualifies in the top 7 this weekend in qualifying. Now, he has not qualified P7 or higher at once this entire season. He's qualified P8 exactly one time, and so my prediction effectively is going to be Yuki Tsunoda has his best qualifying result of the year. Now, that includes both his stint in the RB and in the Red Bull. So this, I think, is going to be a weekend. I think Yuki has done decently around Canada before, and I think I'm hoping that we see a bounce back for him. I know he's really struggling right now, and I'm going to choose to be positive that I think we see Yuki put in a lap, a qualifying session that he's proud of, and finishes in the top 7, putting his best... It would be his best Red Bull from qualifying, and putting that, last place in Spain last time out well out of his mind. So come on, Yuki, don't let me down. But guys, there we have it. The Canadian Grand Prix predictions have come and gone. What do you think of my predictions, and what do you think is going to happen this weekend? Let me know down in the comment section below. I'd love to read what you guys think is going to happen. As I mentioned before, if you're interested in joining the community, subscribe down below, join the Discord, join the conversations, and we'd love to have you join our small little family that we're growing over here. And if you made it this far into the video, leave a like rating on the video because it really, really helps me out. I appreciate everyone who made it this far into the video, and guys, we'll be back after the weekend is over. I hope you enjoy it, and I'll see you guys in the next one.